Well, Paul, Classen, thank you for coming in. Good to have you in our very first podcast episode.
The pod.
The pod. We haven't even created a name for it yet, but maybe we'll edit that in later.
The X-pod.
The X-pod. That's actually a good name for it. We should call it the X-pod, but Elon might have something.
The Everything Pod.
The Everything Pod, yeah. So to begin, a little bit of a backstory. You've been a CEO in 2 or 3 companies. You've been in the business consulting world for a number of years. You've done lots of different things. Tell us a brief story how you ended up in business to begin with.
In business?
In business. How did you first get into business?
Am I allowed to swear?
No.
I'll swear. Stumbled backwards, bum first.
Okay.
The longest story in the shortest form, graduated from uni as a software engineer, hated the work as a software engineer, ended up being a recruitment consultant. By accident, I was very good at it without wanting to flex. And I was headhunted by a very, very small recruitment business. They were tiny, and the offer was come along and work for us, and you can earn equity into that business. And that started my journey. It was complete accident. I never had any intention of doing it.
So if you look back at your business career, like when did you realise you could lead a business?
Say 3:23 today. No, mate. I don't think you make. Well, at uni, I worked at Pizza Hut, and from week 2, I was harassing the store owner to be the manager. At school, I was always trying to be the captain of the house. I got to sort of leadership positions in school. So I think forever I've pursued leadership positions.
Yeah.
That feels to me like a bit of a natural inclination of mine. When did I realise I could be a leader of a business? I genuinely don't think I ever had one realisation. I realised a lot that I was failing as a leader, and the pain of that failure forced me to want to be better, forced me to research, forced me to learn, forced me to apply. And over time, you learn more and more techniques about leadership, and you can get slightly more comfortable. I would never say that. I've never seen anyone being genuinely comfortable as a leader of a business, and I think that's a good place. It keeps humility front of mind.
And do you feel like on that journey as you were going along that there were people that you followed or looked up to or mentored you that helped shape you as a business owner, as a business leader? Who were those people, if there were any, or where did you draw wisdom from?
The one guy I think that taught me most about leadership was Yilmaz Yahia, and he was my second Pizza Hut manager, and I was 18. I don't even know what he taught me except for that you lead from the front.
Yeah,
you just lead from the front, and people look to you, and therefore you're on show. He taught me things like how to tie a tie. I'm not being glib when I say that, and he forced me to wear a tie, and I pushed back on that as an 18-year-old. I was saying, I'm in a Pizza Hut, and he said no, because when people come into the store, they need to know that someone's in charge. Customers or staff, they need to know that someone's in charge. So therefore, you have to look a bit different. You have to dress better because that's an important thing. So I think he would have been the major. If I was to kind of look at one person, and then I think the rest is just an amalgam of all of the people I've looked at. I look to a lot of my clients and I see people exhibit really fantastic leadership attributes. So I'm maybe not modelling, but I look at that and I observe that and I watch how people respond to that. The business world is about people. It doesn't matter how much technology is infused. It's always about people for me, and leadership is the key attribute of people.
So when you think about leading from the front, if you are talking to a person who's young in a business or first getting into business, and he or she's asking you like, what does it look like to lead from the front, and they haven't heard that term, how would you unpack that for them?
I think you have to model the way. I think that is the number one aspect of leadership. You need to demonstrate to people. You can talk to people all you like about core values, but if you don't demonstrate those core values, it's very difficult for people to follow that, because either they'll say it or think it, that you're not being consistent or genuine to what you say are the ways that you should behave. So to me, that's leading from the front, is demonstrating to people how you want them to behave by behaving in exactly that fashion. And I think the other thing is leading from the front is you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You have to own the mistakes, because if you own the mistakes, you can at least attempt to fix the mistakes.
And where do you see, you're looking at the struggles that your customers go through and your clients, you're in the business advisory in the field of consulting. When it comes to people, like what are the mistakes that you see most consistently across businesses?
Let's not talk mistake. Let's think about being less deliberate, because I think it's
good delineation.
Maybe you can consider it that way. Being specific or deliberate about what you're trying to achieve creates a pathway for you to follow. So where I see people being less deliberate, the first piece is I don't understand how you can run a business unless you have a very clear commitment to finding A-player talent and filling your business top to bottom, left to right with A-player talent. You know this, A-player talent in my world is top 10% of talent in a role for that salary, right? So I think commitment to finding A-player talent. The second piece is accountability. Again, these are conversations you and I have all the time. Holding people to account is a challenge. It's hard. And being deliberate about the way you hold people to account it's quite a discipline that you need to be committed to. And then the final piece is leadership. And having a framework about how you lead helps you understand if you're at least progressing as to where you want. So I would always just say commitment to people, getting A players, holding A players to account and leading A players will help you in your business journey. And I'd always say to any business owner, it's important to understand you deserve A players around you. I think a lot of people think, when I grow up, that's when I'll go out and get the A players. I don't know how you can grow up without the A players.
Where do you think that gap comes from? Like, where is that gap in business where...
Dude, what do you think? Insecurity.
Yep.
Everyone's insecure.
Yeah.
Everyone's insecure. So, people have all of these self-definitions around, one day I'll grow up as a business owner. The worst instance of that I see is this imposter syndrome. I hope I don't get found out. You're on show. You're going to get found out. You may as well accept that you're on show. And even if you do get found out, try and improve, because I think people appreciate that effort. I literally just had a conversation. I think your staff, your clients, your suppliers will forgive you a lot of mistakes if you're trying to lead well. I really do think you get forgiven a lot if you're trying to lead well. I think if you're just trying to manage and supervise and you make mistakes, I think people think pretty dimly of you. So that would be my...
How do you find owners can share that? I mean, so giving that explanation of I'm leading my people well to your clients, your suppliers, easy to say, sounds like it's a lot harder to do in terms of getting that in front of your customers and your suppliers to say, hey, I'm trying to lead my staff well. I'm not just trying to manage well.
Ask the question a different way for me.
If someone's trying to display outside of their business that they are leading well, what would be the examples of that?
Well, let's look at it. Values. Leap has a number of values. If people are following those values, it's an indicator that you're leading well, because those values are just simple descriptions of how you want people to behave in your business. That's really what a value is. It's not something that you plaster on the wall. It's how you want people to behave. So if people are following those values, it's likely that you're leading well. If you've articulated the vision of your business, it's likely that you're leading well. If you're looking for people if you're challenging and your team are challenging the norms of business, if you're trying to do something better, not just differently, but better by challenging the existing process, that's leadership. I think, this encouragement and reinforcement piece, that's leadership. I think if you can look down those attributes of leadership, if you break leadership up into the attributes, you need to model how you want people to behave. You need to articulate a clear vision. You need to make sure that people are being encouraged. You're enabling people to act. There's a number of things that you need to be doing. But I think broad form, you'll know you're leading well. Therefore, it'll be demonstrated externally and internally. Simply stated, when people are following what you're doing. Well, that's the essence of leadership. People follow. Because if they're not following, you're not leading. And you can look back at yourself then and say, that's an easy thing. I can lead better to the extent that people follow. But I think you'll find because you are the top in the business, people will follow your behaviours, but maybe they're following behaviours that you don't want them to follow. So therefore, model how you want people to behave.
And so when it comes to modelling and measuring values, like what do you suggest businesses do?
Be deliberate. I know that sounds like a glib thing, but be specific about what you want people to do. Be clear on your values. Be clear on the vision. Make sure you understand where people are. Catch people in the act of doing the things right as much as you can. But I think also, like really fundamentally, parking the measurement thing, it's actually that everyday acceptance that you're going to fail as a leader way more than you're going to succeed. Celebrate your own little leadership victories and just accept that 9 in 10 things that you try, you'll fail. And that's an okay thing.
And so for businesses on that journey of thinking about values, where do you recommend they start?
Inside their own heart. What do you want? How do you want people to behave? Yeah. Values are not a popularity contest. You can't go and vote for values. It doesn't work because you'll end up, or think about it this way. What happens when two values collide? Yeah. Do you go to another vote?
Who wins?
Yeah,
Who wins?
Right. So it's what do you want and what do you think are the values that best demonstrate behaviour that you think aligns with where your business is going, aligns with how you add value, just aligns with what you want to do. Like what's the environment you want to sit in? You're leading it. If you read the original book, I'm sure you've read it, you're a very well-read human, you read the Jim Collins stuff on values, it doesn't talk about votes.
No.
It talks about it being an instance of the leader's value set. And I think that's a very important distinction that maybe got lost in the sands of time and values have ended up becoming this popularity thing. And what you end up seeing in the popularity is integrity, respect, honesty and trust. And typically they're stuck on a wall or customer service is often there and you go to a bank branch, well, you might have in the past, or a government department, I think this is the best one, and you see customer service and you haven't even been served for the last 45 minutes and no one has even acknowledged you, but it's on the wall. Yeah. They're our core values. So they're not your core values. Your core values is something totally different. It's what you as a leader are prepared to hold people to account to or for. So then it does have to come from within you. And sometimes people will find those values repugnant. That's an okay thing. You're not there. It's not a popularity contest. It's a respect contest. So it's okay that people find them a bit repugnant. Over time, those people do tend to fade out of the business, but you attract people who are very attached to those values.
How would you know? Like, what are the examples that you would say to an owner? You've got a values challenge or you've got a leadership challenge. How would an owner know the difference?
I don't know how to answer that correctly. In my role, my job would be, diagnosis. I'd look to try and understand. I'd observe. I'd think. Strangely, I would look at the balance sheet. Okay. I think there's a lot of stories in the finances of a business. I think that tells you a lot about a business as to whether the business can even afford to be focused on values. I think there's a lot of information around the information. So, you tell me. You've been on a journey. Yep. You've been on a long journey with Leap. Yep. Values are a really important thing in your business, and I know that. I speak to you guys regularly. Tell me what your experience with the values has been.
I think for us, values as a journey has been quite up and down in terms of we didn't know we needed them. Yep. And then we realised we did. Mm-hmm. And then we created all the mistakes that you would when it comes to values around aspirational, pay to play, values that you think people want versus values that you are a reflection of who you are. And then having values that are, let's take family as an example, where everyone tells you actually business is more like a team, a sports team, than it is a family. Obviously, people may disagree, but all of those mistakes and faux pas we made on the journey of values. And then eventually after time, the big difference that we discovered is, well, how are we actually measuring values in our business? How do you know that the business is performing from a values standpoint? Yep. Are people engaged? Engagement is a big proxy for values alignment in staff. Not always, but are you actually even measuring staff engagement?
So how are you measuring that engagement?
So for us, we use a platform called Office Vibe,
A software platform.
Yeah, a software platform, and there's many around, I think. But one of the fundamentals we learnt is, okay, if we are committed to the journey of values, surely we should start measuring values and engagement. And so we use a software platform at one level to help us with engagement, and then we have another software platform called Bonusly that we use for recognition. Because again, there's lots of different components to values and engagement, and so we use those tools to basically help us in the business guide the journey of the entire company and the team.
But if you think about that, Bonusly, did you call it?
Yep.
Well, that's encouraging the heart.
Correct.
If somebody behaves in alignment with the values, here's a software tool that's triggering some sort of mechanism at management level which engages the heart, encourages the heart. So you asked me, how do you know?
Yeah.
Well, your mechanism is measure, test and measure, trigger event, pay someone a bonus of some description, reward or recognise that behaviour. So I think you've answered your question better than I can answer your question. But you're using software, broadly speaking, tech, to achieve that on two levels. One is the engagement piece, which I think seems to be broadly around the leadership principles, and then the specific elements of it. Why did you go software, apart from the fact you guys are all software guys? Why did you choose a system to implement that? What's the benefits that those systems have brought to your business?
If we looked back at why we chose any tool, regardless of the current choice, and many businesses don't have any tools, in this space. Some have tools that aren't used, which is probably just the same as not having any tool. But for us, the decision was, well, if we want to continue to be able to grow the business, and a huge part of our values are growing our team members, we need to know that we're progressing. And it's kind of like a North Star. If you say that's where the North Star is, but then people can't see and identify and track it, how are you going to end up at the destination? And then you're prone to wander. The business is prone to wander. The teams are prone to wander.
As in wander, of course.
Yeah, wander, of course, or not be accountable to the values. And I mean, one of the things we spoke about was A players. So if we were to go and look at A players, one of the questions that I hear a lot, and we've discussed this a lot, is how do you find A players and how do you recruit A players? Every business is challenged in WA when it comes to staff at the moment. How are you finding A players and how are you recruiting them?
You're asking me.
I'm asking you.
Oh man,
you've got a wide set of industries that you see, and you see a lot of different approaches. Maybe the fundamentals, less so the championship trophy examples that we can't.
The championship trophy examples. No, because they're the proxies. I think you have to aspire to that, because if you deserve A players, you have to think about the championship trophy examples. And I'm not talking elite sports level. I'm talking local level. How do you do it? Well, I think mindset, think tool set, think execution, right? For me, mindset is that thing I spoke about before. You have to just make that commitment. I'm going to fill my business with A players. That's your mindset. The other mindset is, as perverse as this sounds, you have to be in a world where you are prepared. If you're looking for the top 10%, you have to be prepared to eject 90% of people from the process. So in actual fact, when you're doing recruitment from a mindset perspective, it's all about selecting people out, not in. Most people don't think like that. Most people think, I've got this precious egg, I've got to just nurse it along the way, and hopefully at the end of it, I can keep the egg and put an offer to the egg. Well, what if a lizard hatches out of that egg, right? Yeah. It's not a good thing, right? Yeah. So you've got to look at using the silly egg metaphor, you've got to look at that really carefully, and you've got to eject as many of these things out because you're looking for the top 10%. So that's mindset, tool set. I'm a massive advocate of the Jeff Smart top grading. Well, it's actually Bradford Smart top grading. Jeff Smart then created a version of it which is more right-sized for my market, and then I took that and turned that into an executable system, right? So that's one, is the framework, and that framework is a series of interviews designed to gather data which creates an understanding of the patterns of how a person behaves, because how a person's behaved over the span of their career is likely how they're going to behave in your business, and that's assessing across the three elements of the head, your behavioural characteristics, your intelligence, the heart, which is values match, and the briefcase, which is skills and experience and knowledge, right? So if you can assess those patterns across those three things, I also use a tool called Predictive Index, which is a mostly scientific approach to understanding someone's behavioural and cognitive tendencies. That's the tool set, and then the execution comes back to that same thing. You got to execute. Like, I know that sounds in and of itself, but if you don't follow the frameworks, and if you don't use the information from the tools, you're doing this magic thing called voodoo recruitment, which is literally you kind of going, I reckon they'll be good, or they're really good with, I don't know, give me a software set. Office 365. They're brilliant with Office 365.
Yeah.
And what you'll do is willfully ignore all of the reasons why you shouldn't hire them. If you're looking for all the reasons why you shouldn't hire them, it actually confirms for you why you should hire them. So that's the mechanism by which you hire A players. You got to knock out 90%, you follow a tool set, and you execute by being deeply committed to that. And then, I don't know, what's above that? Like, everyone talks about there being a skill shortage. There's not. There's not.
Why do you say that?
Because the same amount of people live and work in WA that have for the last 20 years. What there is a lack of available staff. And my view on that would be I don't want available staff because they haven't got a job in this market for a reason. Like, they're not that good.
Yeah.
If someone's unemployed in this market, I'd be wanting to know why.
Yeah.
So I want the people that are in a job.
Yeah.
Now, you go back to values, vision, leadership. That's what attracts people. It's not just money. And you, as a owner and manager of an SME, you can't afford to marry up to or go toe-to-toe with BHP.
No. I mean, we've seen that in our experience. If you're trying to hire and you don't have a compelling reason why you can attract an A player, you aren't going to win the salary battle.
No.
And so you need to find sometimes those uncut gems, the diamonds in your backyard, so to speak, that people overlook. And having tools and platforms, in our case, Predictive Index, we subscribe to that, subscribe to cognition testing. And in our business, we also, in the same way a welder or electrician might have to pass a test on skills, our version of that is technology skills. And evaluating all of those together along with the framework that you're suggesting is how we get through that hiring maze.
So tell me, as it relates to your clients, because I'm intrigued by this, and no, this is not a soft question, but if a candidate rolls up to a client site and the tech's come off Noah's Ark and doesn't quite work, and that candidate has a sense or has a knowledge that they're going to be working with tools, which means they're going to be 40% as productive. What's your experience been around someone's ability to hire staff when the environment, let's just call it the tech environment, is not up to snuff? Does it impact it? I don't have a specific view of that, but surely you would if that has an impact or a perceived impact.
Yeah, if a engineer is servicing a client or a consultant or any particular consulting firm with an IT capability, if you're servicing a client and suddenly you understand where is this client heading, where are they going, and along with your skill sets, the two things that happen are, if you haven't first gone on that holiday, how can you advise them what it's like to take that journey? And I use a kind of holidaying example because a lot of times our encouragement to engineers is...
You're talking internal staff?
Yeah, internal staff is how do you take clients on a journey that you haven't subscribed to yourself?
But do you think that if a company's got really bad IT, just using it as the basic term, if a company's got really bad IT, does it inhibit their ability to hire staff? Do people look at that? Do potential candidates look at that?
100%. If a potential candidate, and we've seen this, if a potential candidate is onboarding into a business and as soon as they get into the business, it feels like they're going back in time, you very quickly realise that person probably understands they've made the wrong decision.
Right.
So
it's a sense of not necessarily a specific, oh dear, I'm using old computers.
Yeah, I mean, if you find someone new, and again, this comes back to values and engagement and speaking up, but staff who get into, and you see this often with a change of management or leadership, your managers or leaders who come into a business and see that the business hasn't kept pace, one of their first initiatives is we're playing behind the eight ball. How do we actually not even get ahead? How do we just get on par? And many businesses haven't considered what that is. It's like, well, you're playing with one hand behind your back and your staff are in the same boat. And do you really want your staff in the market when they can't compete?
So tell me, like, let's say I'm talking to a client and I've got, they've got 30 staff and they've got tech that's not on par. What are the top 3 things I should say to a client as to why they should be upgrading their tech as it relates to acquiring and keeping great people? Why would great people? I'll let you answer the question.
Well, I would say I would go back a step. I would first say, if you're in a business and you're looking at acquiring staff and you're acquiring quality staff, what are the chances that they're going to look at the tools that they're given or the environment? And even like, let's take work from home. We're on the topic of people. Number one requirement for many people nowadays is flexible work. If your technology environment doesn't support that, how are you even going to enter that conversation?
Yeah.
You're not even going to get a seat at the table. Now whether or not you agree with flexible work or not, like having the technology in your business to be able to do that is fundamental to being in the conversation. Now, I get there's definitely roles and areas where you can't because of the role, but for businesses that can and have staff that do need to have flexible work, if you don't have an experience or you can't offer that, you're not in the market. Those A players won't even look at you, and that's a challenge that businesses need to face.
So it's a perception risk.
Yep.
So if the tech is bad, not even bad, if the tech is not on par, the perception is that the business is not going to equip me with the tools I need to be able to do my job properly.
Yeah. I mean, I think a key part of this that I always think about is people build businesses. Things don't build businesses. Tools don't build businesses. No. People do.
Yeah.
So as you shared, having A players is a key part of that. What do A players want? They want to be enabled with the best tools, the best frameworks, the best way of operating that allows them to have maximum impact. If you're not giving your staff the chance to have maximum impact with the tools they're using, you really are hindering them. And no one wants to stay at an organisation where they're getting hindered. That's just eventually something's going to give.
Yeah. To go back, you spoke about Bonusly and the other one?
Office Vibe.
Office Vibe.
Yeah.
How many of your clients are using tools like that? Do you advise your clients through that?
Yes, if we were to look at if we were to look at the number one challenge we see in the space of what clients are using around technology for people, most aren't using tools to track values and engagement and recognition. It's probably in small business, it's an area that is still maturing. But when you come across a business that are or have implemented them, you often find their culture is already strong. Their business is growing, they're robust in the way they execute, or their feedback loops are very tight. And you can pinpoint it back to they're tracking what they care about.
This is a bit like me saying I can tell a story from a balance sheet.
Yeah.
You can tell a story from the tech, the tools, how that then relates to the values and the engagement, which then relates to if you've got the tech, you've got the tools, you can acquire A players, you can keep A players.
Yeah, well, I mean, and if we were to think about the risk, I mean, what are the risk of not having A players? Like for businesses that have operated for years without A players, they would argue, well, I think I've got good people. I don't know if they're A players. Is it a risk if I don't have A players? What would you say to them?
I'd laugh. No, I wouldn't. That's a glib response. Forgive me. I would say I would explain it in the most polite way I could. It's a little bit like the trained circus fleas where you put the jar on, they jump, they hit the roof of the jar, you take the thing off, they think that they can only ever jump that high. If you've never had A players in your business, you don't know what your business can achieve. So sure, you won't go backwards or broke, and I don't think like that. The businesses don't typically just fail. They fail mostly by some sort of cataclysmic event, or they fail when the owners give up. And if you've got B or C players on your team, it's really hard to get up the energy curve every day because you can't. So you either give up on your aspirations or give up on your business. Now, I think that's a sad thing. So I would explain to somebody that you don't necessarily know what your business can achieve until you've got A players, and what's the risk in hiring them? What's the downside in hiring them? Well, the downside is simple. You have to lead them.
When people say to you that the natural inclination is to say, well, A players are really expensive, how do you answer?
I'd go back to my definition of an A player. It's the top 10% of talent in that role for that salary. A players are not expensive. You're looking, so if you've got an accounts payable role that's paying $70,000 a year, because that's all you can afford, let's pretend BHP is paying 150. Well, they're not candidates for you.
Okay.
You can't.
Yep.
That's out of your pool, right? So you've got to find all the candidates who are happy with 70,000, and you find the top 10%. Like it's in the maths.
And so if you were looking at those owners who are challenged with A players, and you could instill one trait in these owners, wave the magic wand, what one trait would you want to instill in these owners when it comes to thinking about A players?
The mindset of commitment. You've been there, man. You know this. Sometimes it's easier to just hire because an empty seat can be expensive. Right, that's a fact. So I would say be committed to the journey. It's long, it's arduous, and it's hard. And it's in a business, if you think about the four broad elements of a business, people, performance, growth, and strategy, I'd say the people piece is easily 10 times harder than the other three combined.
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing in business, but it's the most rewarding thing in business. It's worth the work. So I'd say be committed to it. That would be the magic wand I would wave. If I could get everyone to be committed to that, I'd be a happy camper.
And if we're thinking broadly about risk in general, what do you think kind of the owners of businesses that you're working with at the moment are not paying attention to when it comes to risk outside of people that they need to?
Risk.
In general?
I don't think people... So, in a business, let's just call it investment generally. Without risk, you can't have reward. Every investment is risk versus reward. The higher the risk, the higher the reward. So I don't think people are even aware of the risks that they're carrying. So my mechanism, it's very simple and it's very commonly used, is run a risk register. When you run that risk register, you often see people almost like glaze over. It's like, why are we doing this? It doesn't really matter. It's like, well, you need to have just a simple list of the risks that you're carrying in your business so you can be aware of them and you can deal with them. Now, one thing that's becoming really strong, and I'm amazed at how naive people are to this, is this, and this is your area of specialty, but this cyber risk. People have this view, I think, in the market, my perception from the conversations I have, people have a view that cyber risk is for big businesses. Yeah. It's only HBF, not HBF, who got hacked?
Medibank and Optus. Yep.
It's only Medibank and Optus. They're big companies. Of course they'll get hacked because they've got the millions of dollars. And the statistics don't bear out. The statistics bear out that it's easier to hack small businesses and chip 1,000 lots of 20 grand versus going after Medibank and Optus. So, maybe you can tell me about why people don't seem to have an appetite to go and discover risk. That's general business risk, but specifically what I'm seeing is this cyber risk. Why do you think people are willfully blind to it?
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to that one trait I wish I could instill in business owners right now, it's awareness, right? Awareness of cyber risk. Cyber risk at the moment is getting held back in businesses because of I'm not important, I'm not a big brand, no one cares about me. That's exactly the problem.
Because that's the attitude that people rely on.
You rely on people not wanting to act, not putting plans in place, not responding, not even understanding really what they need to protect.
So the biggest risk in business as it relates to cyber is subconscious indifference.
Yeah, and being
that's a sad thing.
It is. Being indifferent to cyber is akin from a risk scenario to saying, well, look, something bad's really going to happen, but I'm just going to ignore it and hope it avoids me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know many businesses where you look at the risk, and my favorite way of explaining cyber risk to people nowadays is, look, cyber risk in general is just like occupational health and safety 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't walk onto a mine site nowadays without high vis and steel cap boots.
Lug nuts that tell you which way to unscrew the tyre nuts.
Exactly. You know, and cyber risk is the same. It's now digital OH&S. It's just the new risk that employees need to understand. You know, you've got a fire warden in just about every building.
Yeah.
My question for most businesses nowadays is like, who are you responding to when there's an incident?
Who's your cyber fire warden?
Who's your cyber fire warden? And who are you calling when things go bad? And the biggest misnomer at the moment is people go, oh, I'll call my IT person. Who's to say your IT person has your incident response plan? You know, because the assumption is, well, they should. And it's like, yeah, but who owns your fire evacuation plan? You do as a business.
Yeah.
You will always know more about your business than an outsourced provider, irrelevant of their capability and size. So if you don't own your risk, you can't completely outsource it.
So let's not talk negatively about your competition. Let's think about the industry in general. I'm talking IT managed service providers. How aware are they of this risk? How alive are they to it? Or are they still very much caught in the world of, I do IT support?
I think there's an internal dilemma facing the industry. You got to remember if you were to trace it back to the advent of the internet, we're a 30-year-old industry. So we're still a young adult. We're still having challenges. And really the question that's getting asked is, do I even enter into cybersecurity as a swim lane? My business has been...
As a service provider.
As a service provider. I mean, people have the swim lane of saying, well, I'm doing telecommunications, doing mobile phones, or I'm doing photocopiers, or I'm doing IT. Well, cybersecurity is just another swim lane. Now, there's businesses that do photocopiers and phones and IT and now cybersecurity. But businesses are looking at that and going, well, hang on, how much of the risk am I now choosing to say that I'm covering?
Right.
And is my ability, capability, scale up to scratch to support the types of businesses that need risk addressed? And not every business has that level of cover, level of confidence, and a level of clarity around what they protect.
Because it's a skill set, right? Like actually being able to advise a client on, what do you call it? The essential 8.
Oh, yeah.
For the punters, what's an essential 8? Help me.
Help you, help me. So the government, when it comes to cyber risk, the government has been very clear around where they want the country to be. You know, like they want us to be the most secure cyber nation by 2030 in developed countries. And underneath that...
Is that like no child will be homeless by 1995?
It could backfire on us, but we're making progress. And so if you were to look at how the government's approaching this, the government is saying, like, what is our role as a country? And their role as government is to lead the conversation, lead the awareness, and hopefully legislate, regulate, and fine, penalise. But in some cases, it's to encourage. And the Essential 8 is the government's mandate to organisations to say, look, we believe these 8 things will help you mitigate 80% of the cyber risks you experience. They're not ever going to mitigate all risks, but the top major ones, this is going to mitigate 80% of them. And so there's 8 pieces of advice, which we won't go into, but there's 8 pieces of advice that I recommend.
Checklist, basically.
A checklist that every business needs to follow, and also government departments, education institutions, across the board. It's where every business should start their cybersecurity journey.
And do you advise your clients through that journey of becoming Essential 8 compliant?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do with our clients when it comes to security is saying, first off, what are you trying to protect? Why are you trying to protect it? And what level of cover or protection do you need? Now, our minimum standard will always be you need to be at least level 1. It's kind of like you need to at least read, write, and do arithmetic. And that's the bare minimum. So for us, that's how we start the journey with customers. And it's the journey we believe everyone needs to go on to the point that it's non-negotiable. For us, the risk is too great to have unprotected customers. It's too significant for us to continue.
So you said that a lot of IT providers, or as an industry, I think were your words, as an industry, people have this view that maybe I shouldn't get into this swim lane or stay in my swim lane. Why did Leap, what drove you to get into that swim lane? Because I'm guessing that exposes your business to some degree of risk in advising people on how to minimise their cyber risk.
Yeah, if you were to look back at the evolution of cybersecurity in our industry, it's gone from being an edge case product that people had as a checklist box, and then it's matured over time to the point where it's become its own domain, profession, and in its own right, a very significant part of the global industry. But for us, cybersecurity is just like occupational health and safety. You can't not protect your staff from health and safety issues. Cyber risk is just another risk, and therefore you need and have an obligation to protect them. So why wouldn't we look at how we can help do that? Now, I think there's all limits. I think if, as we've seen with Optus and Medibank, you can't be everything for everyone, but there's got to be a level of risk cover that you're prepared to say, here's how we want to operate, organise, and present to the market what we're capable of doing. So if you were thinking from your journey in business and kind of the career that you've had in different roles, if you were to think about as a CEO, when you think about risks for business, what is the most underrated risk at the moment that you see for businesses?
That's a really good question, which is a great way of deflecting when I don't have an answer. Compliment somebody on the quality of the question. What is the most underrated risk I see in business? Without throwing you an easy delivery here, I do think people are very naive to the cyber risk issue. I think people are living under this rock of ignorance that says it's a big business issue. It's got nothing to do with us. I think, and I would kind of put that in I would put that as a subcategory of financial risk. And I don't think people tend to really examine financial risk particularly clearly. Look at our journey together, me advising your business. I don't know how many times I bang on at you guys about forecasts and driving your business around forecasts. Well, the forecast is just a tool that helps you measure financial risk in your business. I don't know how many times I've banged on at you guys about balance sheet strength, and that's just another way of measuring financial risk. So I would look at financial risk as the big risk that people are unaware of, because everyone seems to focus on operational efficiency, and when you're, and then if you were to break financial risk up, it's like business health, balance sheet, it's business performance, performance to forecast, and then these kind of, let's call it massive attention drawing risks, which is things like cyber, or let's call it business interruption as a subcategory of financial risk. If your business can't operate because you can't get access to raw data, that is a massive financial risk. If your business doesn't perform, it's a massive financial risk. If it doesn't have core financial health, it's financial risk. So that would be the one I would say, because everybody tends to focus their attention around, I've lost a client. I've lost a key staff member.
Yeah.
I can't get my widgets out the door quickly. Everyone's very, very focused on that, and they're not very focused on this. And I think I'd say 70% of my conversations with people are around the numbers in their business. And people don't tend to spend a lot of time focusing on that. They focus on these other things that they're very comfortable with.
Why don't you think people are focusing on their numbers enough in business? I mean, you see a lot of, I would argue a lot of your clients are kind of mature in their thinking and approach in business. Why don't they focus on the numbers in the way you would expect?
They're really, really mature and developed in terms of their operational expertise, and they're less mature on understanding the key financial documents in a business: profit and loss, balance sheet, financial forecasts.
Margins as well.
Yeah, like it's ugly stuff.
Yeah.
It's really ugly stuff.
What's held back? I mean, we've spoken a lot about forecasts. What's holding businesses back from, we all know you can read it, you can blog it, you can tweet it. What's holding businesses back from really embracing forecasts? And why don't they embrace a forecast? What's behind that?
Exactly the same thing that's behind the infinite array of fad diets and exercise programs. Content is cheap. It's infinite and it's cheap. It's almost free and infinite. I don't know how many bits of content you can get on this kind of hustle porn thing that's around the place. But what's hard is taking that content, turning that into something you can execute, actually being committed enough to execute it, and being held accountable. And I think that last piece is probably that little string of activities has tended to be my unique ability. I can get a concept, I can get I can turn that into something you can execute. I can show somebody how to execute it, and then I can hold them to account. Call it personal training for business, right? Because it seems to me that the more content there is, there's no direct correlationship between that content and performance in business.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses that don't perform.
Overweight in information, underweight in execution.
Right. But isn't that the same as leave?
Yeah.
I could blog, not blog, what is it? YouTube. Grandpa moment.
Yeah.
All the stuff about how to use Office 365.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff around there. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Why don't people have a well-developed IT strategy?
I think most people struggle with strategy when it comes to technology because they struggle with understanding the industry
And strategy generally.
And strategy general. I mean, we always talk about what is strategy. Well, it's just how you're going to win, right? And then the subcomponents of that. But if we were to think about technology, and we think about, well, how are you going to win with technology? And people just assume that, well, it's just a tool, but it's way more than a tool for most businesses now. If you take technology out of most organizations, business stops in some way or form.
Or always.
Or always, depending on what you're doing. And so the first course of action that we always recommend for people is, where are you going? Like, where are you going as a business, and understanding where that is? Because technology that's not planned is like buying ingredients for a recipe you don't know.
Yeah, true.
And if you can't articulate where you're going, any technology will do. And that's what ends up. You end up with a Frankenstein environment, and no one understands why things aren't working, why they don't talk to each other, why they're not sharing, why they're not having information that's trackable. And you can trace it always back to, well, did you begin with the end in mind?
Yeah.
And for us, that's a key part of why we exist. It's like, if we can't help our clients win, like, what value are we adding? You can get...
This comes back to are you just a support desk?
Yeah, I mean, you can get technology nowadays from anywhere and anyone around the world. So if we look at, even if, we haven't touched on it yet, but if you look at artificial intelligence, you don't have to think too far ahead to see where that's going. I mean, for kids that are growing up nowadays with iPads and iPhones, there's not a lot of technology help required. Yeah. So play the tape forward, baby boomers transition, new owners, new generation. What are they going to look for? They're going to look for advantage, value, and competitive edge. Winning. And if you're not helping them win, someone else will be.
I've got a question for you. The archetype of a person running an IT business doesn't roll up wearing a suit and talk so articulately about business.
Yes.
Why are you passionate about business as an IT guy? You're clearly an IT guy. Why are you so passionate about business?
I was probably passionate about business before I was passionate about technology.
Okay.
I grew up, with a family that had a business. And so that rubs off on you, that just osmosis, if you like, you catch. It wasn't the path that I chose, and technology was an interest and it was a hobby. Business and learning and understanding how that worked was probably my passion. And so the two were collided.
Right.
And so that collision is where that desire to get into business and in technology in general. But again, you can have the world's greatest technology. If the business isn't advancing, the technology's moot.
Yeah.
What's the point of having the best of breed or the latest and greatest if the market you're serving, you're not actually competitive?
And as a corollary to that, cloud is not a strategy.
No, and it never has been. And you know what? Before cloud, it was the internet.
Right.
The internet was the strategy. And it was like, oh no, cloud came along and then before that it was mainframes and thin clients. And then, next it's going to be AI and everyone's going to be like, our strategy is AI. Just like, 2 years ago it was Bitcoin and, that was the strategy. And so you see these waves of technology wash over businesses. Very few surf them.
Yeah.
And so for those businesses that learn to surf these technology waves, you find outsized performance, outsized profit, and outsized people performance in those companies because they've adapted.